Another tool we have when working with messages in Azure is the storage queue. If you remember back to blob storage, we briefly mentioned storage queues, both of which are built on top of Azure storage accounts. Storage queues provide us with a place to send our message, but doesn't have the same structure that the service bus provides. For example, message order is not guaranteed. It will typically be first in, first out, but we can't guarantee or trust that the order is correct. And we're also not able to do batch sends. Messages do have to be sent one at a time. However, storage queues does offer some advantages over the service bus. For example, higher storage limits. You can store up to 200 terabytes in a storage queue and create unlimited queues if needed. It also has a lower cost. Since we're only paying for storage, you're typically going to pay less than a service bus. Additionally, since it is part of a storage account, you have the same replication options available like zone redundancy or geo redundancy. When we access a storage queue, we can do so via the portal or by using a URL. Since it is URL based, we need to make sure we're protecting the content, and we have a few options for doing so. And again, being on top of a storage account, we have the same built-in options. The first is a shared key, and this provides access to not only the queue, but the entire storage account. And we also have the shared access signature. If we think back to the storage account blob module, we set up a shared access signature and it had access to only the blobs. We can use the same concept, but this time we're only allowing access to the queues. We can also integrate with Azure AD so we can define access by user or by group. And then on top of all of this, we have a firewall. So this way we can control access so only defined networks are allowed to connect to that storage account queue. When we were working with Event Grid, we leveraged a storage queue, but it was already there. Let's create one, and then let's go look at some of the ways we can access it. So here we are on the portal, and let's take a look at our existing storage queue. So if we do that, let's go to Skyline's demo storage account. And then if we scroll down here, we can take a look at queues. And you can see we already have our existing Event Grid queue, but let's create a new one. So to do this, let's click on queue up top. Let's go ahead and paste our name in this case, Skyline's queue, hit OK, and we can see it successfully created the queue. Now before I jump too far into this, I wanted to take a look at the URL for that queue. And you can see it starts off with our storage account name, and then it's saying it is a queue, and then at the end you can see we've got our queue name. This is something to take note of, so if you're looking at any sort of URL or looking to connect to a queue, for example, you'll have a general idea how the URL is going to look. This could be helpful in the exam if you're being asked to differentiate between a couple different URLs as far as which one is actually a given resource. So with that said, let's go ahead and open up Skyline's queue, and you can see right now we don't have any messages in it. We could click add here and we could do a test message, go ahead and hit OK, and we can see that. If we go ahead and select it, you can see some information about it. We can go ahead and close this out, and if you wanted to get rid of that message, you could select it and DQ, and then it's going to go ahead and remove that message. And again, if we look at the storage account and we scroll back up, you can see we have our access keys. So this could be how we're going to look at securing the queue. And just note, this is going to, again, access the entire storage account, not just the queues. We could also look at our shared access signatures, and then we would uncheck blob, file, and table. So this way, if we created a shared access signature, it would only be for the queues. And also, if we look at the firewall and virtual networks, you can see right now we pretty much have open access. But if we wanted to restrict that further, we click selected networks, restrict it to a specific VNet or to a specific IP range. We're going to go ahead and discard that for now. And what I would like to do is look at a way that we can send messages to the queue using PowerShell. So let's go ahead and go to Visual Studio Code. And I'm going to close this and we'll scroll up. You can see lines 1 through 3. Essentially what we're doing here is we're going to define which storage account we're working with. So in this case, the storage account is again Skyline's demo storage account under the Skyline's resource group. And then we're taking that and basically saving that as a storage account variable. The next line is we're taking the context for that storage account and then saving it as a variable CTX. Looking at lines 5 and 6, we're using the command get az storage queue, and then we're specifying our queue name, which is Skyline's queue, and then the context, we're specifying the CTX variable, which points back to our Skyline's demo storage account. We're saving that as queue. what we did so far is basically define the queue that we're working with and how to connect to it. On line 11, what we're going through and doing then is we're calling the Microsoft.Azure.Storage.Queue.Cloud.Queue.Message class, and we're defining a new message in here, and we're just calling it sample message 1. We're saving that as queue message. And then on the line 14, what we're doing is we're basically calling our queue. We're calling the method cloudqueue.addMessage, and then we're passing in the message that we created on line 11. And then if we look at the remaining ones, we're just doing that over and over again for sample message 2 and sample message 3. So let's go ahead and I'm going to copy this. And if we go back to the Azure portal, we've got a Cloud Shell open here. And we're using PowerShell. And I'm just going to go ahead and paste this in. And then if we run the command queue, you can see here we've got the URI for the queue as well as the queue name. And right now we don't have any messages in there. So let's go ahead now and let's call these commands. And these are going to go ahead and send some messages. So I'm going to type clear. I'm going to paste these in. And looks like everything completed successfully. Now if we go back to our storage account, let's scroll down, go to queues, and let's look at our Skylines queue, and now we can see those 3 messages are there. So again, there's a couple different ways we can work with storage queues. The example I provided was just PowerShell. You can use .NET or Python, multiple ways to interact with it. Hopefully this helps, gives a little more insight into queues as far as how you can secure them and how you can interact with them.